welcome to another Pixel Game Maker tutorial. Today we're going to be going over a flashlight effect that is going to follow your player depending on the direction. It's going to light up things as the objects or tiles get in the light layer, and then also the light is going to follow a connection point based off the animation, so you can get these cool effects where it looks like it's following the animation as you're running as well. So let's get started, and I'm going to go to the scene I'll be using for this tutorial, and it's a simple scene. It's got everything on one layer, and it's also got a player object that I have already pre-set up the animations for. I have a idle flashlight and then a running with a flashlight animation, and in each of the directions of both the run and the idle, I have set up the connection points that I want to use to follow the light as best as I could get it. And if you remember the connection point, you can right click on the connection point, you can change the name. I've named mine flashlight. And then depending on the frame that you're using, these are the frames that are up here. Depending on the frames you're using, you can go down and you can right click and add a keyframe. When you add a keyframe, you will then be able to move the connection point to an area, and it will keep it there until you have another keyframe. So that's how that works, just real briefly. Also in the objects, it's a controllable player object that I have, and it has the default wait walk. The only thing I've added is a setup that just darkens the screen before it goes into the wait walking. That looks like this. So we can get this default area. Okay, with that said, let us get started, and let's figure out how to do these lights and make it react on the direction. So let's get a light on here. Go to get a light, add one, and I'm going to call this a down beam. It's going to be a light. We'll set up a switch later, but it will have a switch eventually. We're going to set it at a 45-degree central angle with a 45-degree dot radius, and we want it to be facing down, so we want it at the 180 degrees. So with the 45-degree width, it's going to go 22.5 this way, 22.5 this way, which will give us a flashlight angle. I'm going to have a 1 opacity, 150 red, 100 green, and 0 blue on the hues. I want 100% circumference, and I want the connection point to be the flashlight connection point that I made in the animations. So let's hit play and see how that looks. And alright, it gave us a flashlight that looks very similar to the one we set that I showed in the beginning. But it is a little off. We need to move it to the left one and maybe up one. So let's move it to the left, -1, and the y-axis, -1. And we get a flashlight that's more associated with where the light is on the sprite. Alright, so that looks good. Well, actually, let's talk about something. The one thing that kind of looks off is from where the light is initially coming from. It's kind of more solid color. It doesn't look like it's really beaming from the light. So we are going to change that. We are going to let's add another light. And I'm actually going to put this light on top because we only need one of these. And I'm going to call this the origin. You could say the flashlight origin or whatever, but the origin is what I'm going to name it. We will set the light. We don't need a switch for it. It's going to be a circle, so 360. We are going to have a 3-dot radius. Rotation doesn't matter because it's a full circle, and we're going to give it the same hue. If you're wanting to tab through these, you'll have to hit tab twice for some reason to quick bounce between these settings. Full circumference blur on it. We also want it to follow the flashlight, and we will also give it a -1 on the X's and the Y's. And when we hit play, we see that now there's a little light coming from that flashlight that you have. So it looks a lot better as far as it just looks more natural like a flashlight. So we've got this set up. Now let's start walking around, and you'll notice that the light it's moving, like it's going to the right connection points, but it's not following the player. And that is because we actually have to have a beam for every direction that the player is facing. So we're going to need to set up a beam for this direction. We'll need to set up a beam for when it's facing up, and then a beam for when it's facing right. So let's go ahead and do that real quick because we already have the template. We already have the down beam. So if we copy and paste the down beam and we named it the left beam, all we have to do on this is change it to rotating from the left. So if we hit that, it will now be facing the left. So then we can copy or paste again, and we can name it the right beam, and we can make it aiming right, which is 90 degrees. And then we can copy paste again and do an up beam, and this will be facing 0 or 360. You can use either one for the direction. And so now we have the down, the left, the right, and the up beam. Now if we were to hit play right now, all beams would be showing, and it would be going based off your connection point. And so now what we need to do is we need to add some logic. We need to say, okay, we want you to show this beam when you're facing this way, this beam when you're facing this way, so on and so on. So now we need to start thinking about how we're going to do that. And one way that we can associate which beam to turn on is by a switch. And we have an enable disable switch option here, so we're going to use that. So we're going to add 4 switches. We're going to call this one down, add a switch, call this one left, add a switch right, add a switch up. And you will probably want to be more specific if you're on a larger project, flashlight beam down or something like that. But with a tutorial like this, we can get away with something simple. So on the down beam, I want it to be when down switch is on. The left beam, I want it to be when the left switch is on. The right for right, and up for up. So now if we hit play, the only thing that it's going to be showing is our origin because it doesn't have a switch associated with it. And that is fine for now because we're just going to have the light running constantly. If you wanted to make a flashlight switch where when you hit a button it turns the flashlight on and off, then you would add a flashlight on switch that would kind of catch all of these. So now we have the switches set up for the beams. Now we need to create the logic in the programming. So we could do it out in this player object, but it would get really big really quick because you'd have to have a down, right, left, or a down, left, right, up check for waiting, and you'd have to have a down, or you could share the same ones and have all these black lines just going everywhere, all these transitions going everywhere. Well, another way we can do this more cleanly is having a childed object to this object that is running the logic of the directions in the background. And so that might not make sense, but let's just bear with me a minute and hopefully it will make some more sense. So when I child an object, I like to add a folder and I like to call it the object's name that I am representing inside this folder. So this is going to be the player flashlight. Yeah, we'll just name it that. So the player flashlight, and I'm going to throw this player in that folder now. And I'll open it up, and this is my player flashlight object. So this is going to be the parent, and I like to name the parent whatever it does. So I'm going to change its name, and I'm going to, let's see, what does this object do? One, it provides the animations. So it's the sprites. The other thing that it does is it's the movement. It is the one that the controller will move. So it also does the movements. And also we just set up the lights in this object, so it also contains the lights. And I'm going to press enter, and so now this object is going to be the parent, and it's of the sprites, movements, and lights for the player flashlight, if that makes any sense. It's just, I'm trying to organize this as best as we can in Pixel Game Maker. So, yes, so now we need to add a child. So I'm going to right click on the folder. I'm going to add an object. I'm going to name this object. I'm going to do an underscore, and that represents that it's going to be a child under whatever object that I put it on. So there's no real nesting objects like you can in Unity. So this is my way of doing it, is just by a naming convention. So the name of this, it's going to be a child, and it's going to be the flashlight direction controller, or control, that works too. And it's going to be non-selected. We don't need a sprite for it. I'm going to put it in neutrals, and I'm going to take away all the detections, because this is literally purely logic behind this object. I'm going to hit OK, and it now creates the child that I'm going to use. And the default action, we don't really need an action per se, because that's not where I'm going to do the logic here. So I'm just going to call it setup, and I'm just going to leave it as that. That's all it's going to be. I'll show you how we're going to do the switches and stuff like that. And it's nested underneath, so I now know that the sprites, movements, lights, this is the child, which is the flashlight direction control. And okay, so let's get the logic going. How I'm going to do the logic in this one is I'm going to set a common action within this child, and I'm going to click OK. It's going to bring up the common actions option, and I'm going to add a common action, and I'm going to call this facing down. Okay, so facing down, and this arrow right here is going to be the transition into facing down. And so the transition into facing down is going to be when let's see here, facing object is facing a specified direction. Here we go. So we're going to click this on, and we're going to say when it's facing a specified direction. So it's going to be checking whether the object is facing down, and we can specify further which object, and it's going to be the sprites, movement, and light object. So if the sprites, movement, or light object is facing down, and we need to add another one, because we don't want this to keep facing down if you're facing down. And how we're going to do this is when you are facing down, let's just do this real quick. When you're facing down, we are going to change a switch. We're going to change the sprites, movement, light switch, and we're going to change the down to on. And that is going to turn the down on. So what I meant by we don't want it to keep continually coming to facing down if you're facing down, then we need to add another condition that says also the switch of the sprite, movement, light object, the down, needs to be off. And we'll leave this at and. So we're saying, is the player is that object facing down, and is the movement down switch, is the down switch of that object off already? Because if it's off already, it means that it's not facing down. Then it will come to face down. It will turn that down on, which turns the light on facing down. And then it won't continually loop in here, because in order to keep doing this loop, this down switch would have to be off, which it won't be if you're facing down. So I hope that makes sense. That's the logic behind it, though. So The other thing that we have to do is that it will be coming from another direction, so we have to make sure that we're turning the other switches off. So I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste this, and we're going to make sure that left is off when you're facing down. We want to also make sure that the right is off, and we also want to make sure that the up is off. So this is how it will look: is you will turn on the down and you will make sure that left, right, up is off. And then to get in, like we just said, you have to be facing down and the switch has to be off. Then it turns it on and then it can't loop back and forth. At this point, it doesn't matter where it goes because it's just going to go to this setup, this static setup, which is just waiting for the next movement input. And the common action will take care of all of the rest. Okay, so we have the facing down, and that is the template of what we're going to use for the other logic. So if we were to click play right now, actually, we need to go to our sprites and movement object here. Click on the cogwheel, and let's click on connected object. Hit OK, and then go to connected objects, and we will add the flashlight direction control, and we will select the flashlight direction control. We will have no switch, meaning that it just comes automatically. We will just leave it at the center of this object, and we will make it into a child. And that's all we need to do to set up the child. So this object is now officially attached to this object, and when we click play, because we are facing down, that common action worked. So we can go back and let's set up the other directions. So let's go to common action. If you click just right below, you want to get this highlighted green, you can actually copy and paste. That's how you can copy paste these actions. And on this one, we're going to do facing left. And let's change the transition first. And if you're facing left, the only way you can get back into this program is if you're not facing left. So if left is off, then, and the direction needs to be left. So we'll change both of those. Now we'll go into the meat of it, and we will turn left on because we're facing left now. So we'll turn left on, and then we will let's go to this one and turn down off. So now we have the left on, down right, up off. Okay. And let's hit play and just see if we can bounce back and forth between left and down. So if you hit left, there goes your light source to the left. If you hit down, it goes down. So do you see how that logic's starting to work? If I was to go right or up right now, it's just going to stay on whatever one we had last because we don't have the logic for right and up yet. All right, so let's finish off these last two. Copy, paste. And this one's going to be facing right. The transition is going to be if the parent object is facing right. And it's also going to be if right switch is off, and that way it doesn't continually loop as you're facing right. We're going to turn the right switch on, and we're going to turn the left switch off. I'm just finding where the switches were. That way you don't have to keep adding or copy pasting. I'm just rearranging them as I copy paste them. All right, so let's just make sure that right works. So right, left, down. There we go. Now we're just missing up. All right, so let's finish this off here. Facing up. I know this is a little longer tutorial, but I think we're getting some good topics here. We will face up here. We will change the up switch to off so it's not, again, continually looping. We will turn the up switch on, and we will turn the, what switch is missing actually? Down, left, right. Okay, so the right switch off. Okay, and this should be it. This should be our flashlight. There we go. Now, one thing to remember is I have a treetop here that is on the layer above, and that is because these lights are layer specific as of right now. So I know it's something that could be a problem, uh, potentially, and hopefully they will add more support to adding in layer controls to these lights. But for right now, just note that layering is something to pay attention to. So yeah, we made a flashlight effect and everything went pretty well, and we will see you again.